Sicily is an island renowned for its sweets, yet few visitors realize that behind every confection that delights their palate lies a story, a secret, or a saint, or the story of a saint and a secret. Depictions of food abound in Sicilian culture and literature, and whether rooted in poverty or wealth, food is intimately tied to every Sicilian's identity. The phenomenon of convent confectionery offers a fascinating example of how Sicily's rich and often tumultuous history is still present in the sweets Sicilians consume daily, as well as for their many traditional celebrations. Sicily sits at a crossroads in the Mediterranean, and this strategic geographic position made it a coveted prize for successive conquerors over 2 millennia. Each new invader left its imprint on the Sicilian landscape, and nowhere is this more evident than in the architecture and the cuisine still found on the island today. Greeks built temples and brought olive trees, cheese-making knowledge, honey, figs, and grapes. Romans constructed villas for their vacationing senators while cultivating wheat to feed an empire. Arabs added mosques, planted sugarcane, date palms, pistachios, and introduced exotic spices and techniques for making ices. Normans established Christianity in the 11th century and combined the artistry of previous Muslim and Byzantine conquerors to build palaces and cathedrals for the most enlightened court in Western Europe. Spaniards, fresh off their conquest of the New World in the 1400s, brought Aztec chocolate-making knowledge, citrus, tomatoes, and prickly pears, along with enough wealth to build some of the finest Baroque structures in all of Europe. The Spanish preoccupation with form, a fondness for Baroque architecture, elaborate ceremony, ostentatious displays of wealth, and insatiable appetite for luxury goods extended to the kitchens of wealthy Sicilian nobles. Cooks used a multitude of costly ingredients to create complex and visually stunning dishes, as much to please the palate as to demonstrate social status. What then is the connection between the opulent lifestyle of the Sicilian nobility during these 400 years and the simultaneous rise of convent pastry making? Why is it that exquisite confectionery consumed by a tiny elite class was produced almost exclusively in Sicilian convents? Convents were religious in nature, but aristocratic in origin, and their widespread diffusion is traceable to the Catholic nobility's continued practice of primogeniture that consolidated a family's power and wealth in the hands of the eldest male child. Younger brothers, at least, could pursue a military career or choose a religious order that guaranteed a comfortable life with freedom to move about. Daughters, however, if not given in marriage that required a substantial dowry, were placed in convents at a tender age, generally between 7 and 9 years of age. Within these walls, they would live out their days in relative comfort given their family's wealth, but were denied any access to the outside world, as most of these convents were cloistered. The dowries of these young girls consisted of the usual luxury personal items, but also included expensive ingredients, consumable goods that the convents could not otherwise afford. Sugar, spices, chocolate, pistachios, and almonds were all gifted on a regular basis, thus providing nuns, who had no outlet for their creative energies, the opportunity to experiment in the kitchen. In this sense, Sicily's convents were veritable pastry labs. The gifting of these delicacies to doctors, lawyers, and prelates was an elegant and meaningful manner of payment for various services rendered to the sisters. But it was also a way for cloistered young women to stay connected with the outside world. Sweets were exchanged for a bit of gossip or to curry special favor. But as convent rule demanded, they were always exchanged on a rotating wheel behind a grate, so the nuns could never be seen. The desire to please their benefactors and be recognized for their talent led to intense competition among the monastic orders. Recipes were carefully guarded and committed to memory, with each convent developing a reputation for a particular specialty. By 1800, the city of Palermo alone counted no fewer than 21 convents vying for such recognition. Nuns now began to pay closer attention to form and aesthetics of their creations, fashioning sweets that attempted to seduce the eye and the imagination as much as the palate. The classic cassata and la frutta martorana exemplify how Sicilian nuns incorporated the Baroque art and architectural elements that surrounded them into their pastry making. Over time, the nobility's appetite for these delicacies increased both demand and the production of confectionery, as sweets were now purchased for festival celebrations set by the church's liturgical calendar. By the 1500s, a practice not born out of any commercial intent had evolved into a precious source of income for the convents, so much so that the nuns from the diocese of Mazara del Vallo were forbidden to make cassata during Holy Week so that they might not be distracted from their prayers. The poorer classes were also introduced to these confections consumed by elites, since the nuns' vows of poverty required them to distribute a certain quantity of their production to the poor. If, on the one hand, the nuns displayed a high level of creativity in confectionery such as ossa dei morti, or bones of the dead, for the Feast of All Souls, and gli occhi di Santa Lucia, St. Lucy's eyes, for the Feast of St. Lucy, and the exquisite agnelli di Pasqua, or Paschal lambs, for Easter, other elaborate creations were more suggestively named, clearly providing an outlet for palpable fears, testa di turco, or the Turk's head, as well as repressed material and sexual desires. Consider the delicate sospiri e desir, sighs and desires, the delightful mine di vergini, virgin's breast, and the decadent trionfo di gola, or triumph of gluttony. All are less products of religious fervor than repositories of unconscious longing in women bound by vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. When the new Italian government suppressed religious institutions in 1860, only convents that could sustain themselves economically, by now almost exclusively through the sale of their sweets, remained open. Nuns who returned home continued to produce sweets, introducing them into the general population. It is during this period that we see the establishment of the first renowned pasticcerie on the island, including Gulli in Palermo and Amato in Catania. In those convents that did remain open, we find a dramatic change in the internal workings of the convents and the production of confectionery. Mother superiors now assume the role of procuring expensive ingredients while encouraging lay sisters, or poor women, to enter the convent to help keep up with increasing demand and a heavy workload. A case in point is that of Maria Grammatico, whose widowed mother, unable to feed and care for 6 children during World War II, placed Maria, age 11, and her younger sister, age 6, into the cloistered convent of San Carlo in Erice. In her memoir, Bitter Almonds, Maria minces no words in conveying the immense human toil that lay behind the production of confectionery. At 1 o'clock at night, we had to go and light the oven. They came knocking at 1, and we got up. I could not bear it. It was freezing cold. We had to light the fire before 4, because when the sisters arrived, the oven had to be hot. That was when they would begin baking. Then there was breakfast. We used to have bread with milk. While the sisters went about their special duties, the rest of us went down to the workshop. There we made the marzipan, fruit lambs, and hearts, depending on the season. There was a day set aside for crushing almonds, and so we crushed. And there was a day for peeling almonds, and so we peeled. We would crush them using a hammer and stone. In 1 week, 8 of us could crush almost 800 kilos of almonds. You needed 5 kilos of almonds to make 1 kilo of shelled almonds. When she could, Maria watched, spied, and secretly learned the nuns' recipes, eventually leaving the convent to open what is now the most renowned pasticcerie on the island. In conclusion, Sicily's greatest writers have long focused on the enigmatic nature of Sicily and its people, on appearance versus reality. This topic expands upon that observation, challenging our assumptions both about convent life and the presumed secular origins of confectionery. It enhances our understanding of how Sicilian women, long confined to domestic, or in this case, cloistered spaces, discovered meaningful ways to interact with an outside world, contributing, perhaps unknowingly, to one of Europe's grandest culinary traditions.